your life in a sense. But then again, here we are, we get to addiction. So that's where I was discussing the disease of addiction and it being that chemical imbalance and how that is a genetic disease. And so once we have ignited that little part of your brain, before you know it, that use that has gone to abuse now turns into addiction. And then at some point you may or may not go into treatment and get diagnosed with a substance use disorder. So that's the little
that's the Cliff Note version.
Yes.
Okay, the Cliff Note version. LaDonna, would you like to add more?
Yeah.
I think to simplify it, I would associate substance use with recreational use. Someone who might smoke a joint of marijuana, or someone who might have a drink and they can drink and they can put it down and they can go on about their way. Abuse to me is indicative of something that is starting to change the quality of your life. That I'm not just using it and putting it down, I am abusing it. I have gone from maybe occasional use to using every weekend or using every day, or drinking or smoking to an excess, and it begins to change the quality of my life. And then for me, when I look at addiction, I look at that chasm where there's a void there and nothing can fill it. That if I am using, I stop using, and then I might use food, or I might use sex, or I might use money, but it's all designed to make me feel better. So disorders are one side of it, but when I look at it, I look at the use, abuse, and addiction aspect of it.
So you mentioned, and I'll put this out to Victor as well. So you mentioned that people are trying not to feel, right? When there are, and so how is that indicative of the utilization of drugs as being a response to something? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, I think LaDonna, there's no way I can explain that better than she did. But I started out using, and that eventually led to abusing. And as what I thought I was getting a good feeling, the characteristics of having fun, being this different person, then what I found out later with the abuse side of that, it was that all of that was euphoric, right? And so the wanting to not feel what I was getting as far as the negative consequences, the results of trying to feel good, ultimately carrying me to a feeling of feeling less than, self-loathing, those type of degrading type of feelings. That's where I ended up at in my abusing substance. And then the whole addiction part of that just took me to that point to where it was just, not only did I not want to feel, I didn't want to be present, in this world, and so the only thing I knew how to do was to keep on doing what I was doing, which was abusing.
I feel you. When I was using, there was a time when I just didn't want to be. But I was such a coward, I wouldn't go commit suicide. But when I was using, I was committing suicide on the slow train, right? So my next question is one that's real dear to me, because the question is when did you realize that you needed help with your substance abuse, right? So I'm gonna start with Victor. When did you know that it was a problem?
Hey, what Carl? I knew, man, during the 22 years that I was in active addiction, there were many times, right, that I recognized that there was a problem and I needed help. The first thing that probably started was that I was aware that my personal hygiene was disrupted. And then I recognized that I couldn't not just be on time to a job, but I couldn't hold that job. And then when I stole from my mother, you know, that was one of those times that really, there was no denying that something was really pitifully wrong, you know, and that I needed to do something different, you know, in order to make a change. You know, the continuation of going down the same road that I was going down, I will continue to cause that kind of harm to not just myself, but to loved ones, and anybody in my past would reap those same harmful, you know, those same actions that, you know, that I took that caused that harm continued to happen. So there was many times.
Sarah, and when did you find out you had a problem?
When did I find out? For me, it was, which I was in and out of treatment, whether for mental health or whether for my addiction or both. And then finally, when I can tell you where I was and what I was wearing and what time of day it was when I decided I was just fine. I was sick. I was tired. I was tired of being sick and tired. Like, it was time for me to stop. And I think my first treatment facility I was 15 years old, and I was in and out of treatment and institutional, well, I don't want to say institutionalized, but in and out of jails and institutions up into the time, gosh, to my early 20s when I finally decided to stop. So it wasn't, it was a long road. It wasn't just like, oh, I'm going to go into treatment today and I'm going to go get help and then I'm going to come out and I'm going to be cured. It's going to be wonderful. It was not that. I was drugged and put and pushed and took, and finally I got tired. I think that answers it.
LaDonna, I want to ask you a question, right? Like me, I was a drug addict who wore the suit and the cufflinks and drove a BMW, right? And was Mr. Hunter at work, right? So what does a drug addict look like?
Okay.
Right. What, you know, you have the stereotype, right?
Right.
That everybody thinks, right? But what does a drug addict look like?
You're looking at one.
Mm-hmm.
You're looking at someone. It can be very deceptive. We are masters at deception in terms of being able to dress it up. And well, let me speak for myself. I was able to dress it up and look a certain way. And because I had the kind of mother who would prop me up and post me up, and she didn't want me to look like an addict, and she would get my nails done and she would get my hair done, and the clothes were always clean because that's what we did. It was always about how we looked on the outside and never about how I felt on the inside. So it was really easy because I spoke well and I'm college educated, and none of that stuff had anything to do with how I felt on the inside or those reasons that I got high. I could make it look good. And I could get good jobs, but I couldn't keep good jobs. I could put myself in good situations, but I couldn't keep myself in good situations. So To answer your question, I think an addict can be the person, what we would like to see, what we think it is someone who's laying out on the sidewalk, who hasn't taken a bath, who hasn't brushed their teeth, but that's not, it's a slow process. It's a slow grind. I looked as neat as I look today. You know, I have pictures of myself where you wouldn't have known by looking at me, because it was all about a look good in my family. It was all about a look good. So it's not a look.
So there's not a stereotypical drug addict.
No,
Right?
there is that societal stereotype, and then there's reality. You know, I have known in my life preachers that got high. You know what I'm saying? I have known nurses and doctors, and it's like addiction is pervasive. It is at the core of our society, and its tentacles will reach out and touch any profession, lawyers, doctors. It's pervasive. So there really isn't a look, and we deceive ourselves if we try to fit it into a box, because you can't fit it into a box. We would like to, but
Anybody else want to speak on that? Anybody else?
Well, yeah,
I got tons of questions.
I think and LaDonna's 100% right about that. You just can't fit it into a box. And I can recall the times when, I was the type of addict that very rarely was I able to get myself together and look like something that I wanted to look like, other than the stereotypical drug addict, right? So, but I can recall the times when I was out doing the things that I did to get my drugs, and that I would make transactions with people like the people that LaDonna spoke about, who were prestigious people in doctors' uniforms, lawyers' uniforms, and they would socialize with me to get the dope that they needed, the same dope that I was getting and using them to get what I needed. They were in the same dilemma that I was in. You just couldn't tell, and it didn't look like it, and you wouldn't know that unless you were me, dealing with that person on that situation.
So LaDonna mentioned a significant thing. Her mother propped her up. So let's talk about, right, how our family and folks enabled us. So how let's talk about the family from a point of being an enabler, right? Of that keeps you going, because if you didn't have the enablers, you might hit that brick wall and be like, oh, I need to go get help. So how did your families enable your continued drug use? Anybody can pop up. Sarah, you look like you just want to answer that question.
It's at the tip of my tongue. Because I just am foreseeing like all this stuff. I just remember so much behavior, and I tell my clients this all the time, that, the thing that when my parents kicked me out, I was 17, and they were like, you simply can't stay here any longer. That's just not going to happen. I tell you where you're not going to stay, and that's the street. So let me put you up in an apartment and make sure you got everything taken care of, but you can't stay here. So basically it's like, here, keep doing your drugs, but here's a beautiful home and all of your, well, it wasn't a home, but here's a place to stay. And I think with that help, I know with that help, it enabled my behavior. I know that I had to do, I had certain expectations and stipulations around their help, and I did just the bare minimum to get by. Oh, well, I'm doing what you told me to do. So you can keep paying this for me, and then I can go make this money and then snort it and all this other stuff. Okay, done. So like, that's the enabling piece for me. They're always picking me up from jail. I didn't really have significant consequences as far as that. It was never figure it out on your own. It was, we'll be there, or they didn't even say it, they just got there. Sending me money when I needed it. Giving me credit card numbers and such over the phone because I was struggling to put gas in my car. But I tell you what, I was able to go party all night. I know that. So just, it's something so simple. People don't even realize that. I say that, I say simple lightly. But it could even just be them allowing me to come into the home to even eat if I didn't have any food in the house. Like, you're still allowing me to continue what behavior I'm doing by inviting me in and helping me with this. So it's a touchy and very, it's like treading light. You got to tread lightly with that, because what one may think is help is enabling, right? I mean, we all know that. So that's my thought. That's what happened with me.
Okay.
Yeah, that was a good summary, Sarah. So carry the message and not the addicts, right? That's what I learned in the room of Narcotics Anonymous. And my mother raised 6 of us, and so she was poor. So though there may have been times where she wanted to enable me, she couldn't. She wasn't able. But as an addict, I learned how to take my conniving outside of family and corral significant others in the form of a woman who would be willing to put up with my stuff. And in my experience, I can recall a time to where one particular woman was so enabling for me that she became sick herself. And I mean, what it did for me, it just prolonged my insanity, and it prevented my process from happening sooner than it should have. I believe like the bitter end should have happened in a time frame before, previously, than this time period that prolonged my insanity, that possibly I could have gotten to my bitter ends ahead of time and actually been ready to receive the help that was offered to me. And I can recall going to treatment one time because I felt like I wanted to do something different. And this woman not being able to maintain her livelihood because I had made a change. If it wasn't for nothing but those 30 days that I got out of rehab and I was somewhat different, right? All the principles wasn't instilled in me. I wasn't really practicing, but I have managed to abstain from using dope. So my want to was there. And so I was doing things other than getting high. And so, but she couldn't handle that. So I can recall her bringing me some money when I was at home, bringing me some money saying, Victor, go do what you do. And that took me back out because she couldn't live with herself the way I was living. So she became just as sick as I was.
LaDonna, thank you, Victor. LaDonna, let's talk about from a clinical standpoint and from just regular folk standpoint. How does an active addict disrupt the family system?
How does an active addict disrupt the family system?
When the family system is trying to you know how all systems, right, work in a certain way, but if a cog is off and the system works off the one cog, the whole system is dysfunctional, right? And so when an addict is active in a household, what does that do to the family?
Well, it changes the dynamic of the household. What it does is that if you have someone who is using, then there may be, you would like to think that in your family, everyone trusts one another, that you can lay your purses down and you can put your wallet down, and you can maybe keep your diamonds in the drawer, and you might have a piggy bank over in the corner where you save quarters, and everyone puts the quarters in, and you have a place where you have food, and you have this pro-social interaction going on, and everyone's sort of bouncing and behaving. Well, if you have an addict in the midst of that, we begin to operate in ways and means to get more. So therefore, what's going to happen is that I'm going to say, I'm going to take a few of these quarters out of here and I'm going to go cop. And before you know it, the quarters are gone. I might begin taking the jewelry, the food. I go out and stay 2 and 3 days. And then if you have younger people, let's say if it's a mom and dad, you know, moms come home after work. Moms don't stay gone for 2 and 3 days. So the children get confused. I mean, there's a plethora of ways that the family is going to begin to get twisted or broken because of that broken dynamic. There's not going to be any trust there. You're going to find that there's probably going to be more dissension in the household. Norms will be broken. You know, we call it the elephant in the middle of the living room, especially if you have the kind of family that doesn't like to talk about what's really going on. It weakens the family system. If you have a dad that's using and there's a mom and kids, then sometimes the kids get confused as to what their roles are. And the older kids start taking care of the younger kids so the mom can work. And then when the dad comes back, he's not respected as the head of the house because he's been out using. So there's a myriad of challenges that come with addiction in the family. You are on mute, Carl. You're muted.
It was like a kung fu movie. My mouth was moving, and yeah. Oh, okay. Oh, listen, we got Dennis asked this question, and I think it's about folks that the question is, what and when was the closest you came to using besides early recovery, and what were the stressors, and what did you do to overcome the strong urges?
Could you repeat that again?
Sure. What and when? Check this out. Let me paraphrase, right? You guys have some clean time, and based on your clean time, has there ever been a time when you felt like using, and what was the stressors, right? That was the causal source of you feeling like using, and what did you do to overcome, right, the need to use? Is that clear?
Yes.
All right.
I can jump in on. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No.
Go ahead.
Well, let me say this, and I'll clear it up on my addiction. I have not thought about using in 26 years. I don't think about using. I've never thought about using. I've never had anything to happen to make me want to use, because my bottom was so low at the end of my road that I've been sold out to this since the day I walked in the door. So I've never thought about using. And people will say, nah, I've never thought about using because I did enough damage when I was out there before I got here. And I know that there's some ugly stuff out there waiting. So go ahead, Sarah.
Okay. Yes, ma'am. I love it. For me, I felt, you know, I told myself that, so they tell you in life, society says those big stressors, right? Divorce, finances, and move, right? Well, let me go back to where I was at first, and that's saying that I had a feeling that I would not be in the best place if my mom had passed, and I don't know what I would do. So now I'll put a pin in that for a minute. So then let's go back to 2 years ago before I came to Austin. I lived in Baltimore and I was with my husband at the time. We moved to Houston and then we separated and went our separate ways. And now here I am in Austin. So I say all that very quickly because not only did I go through a divorce, which was a financial change for me, I moved not once, but twice within a year. And then, oh gosh, finances move. And, oh my God, I just said it. What was it? I just had a blank moment.
All right, take your time.
Divorce, relationships.
Somebody pay out. Oh my gosh, I'm having a moment. Anyways, I went through all of that within the last 2 years. And so on top of that, right when COVID started, my mother passed. And it will be a year in March that she's been gone. I know when I first moved here to Austin, I'm so thankful for my sister and her family, but they have been there for me. And so they were my support system. But I say all that because I did, in those moments of all of this stress that I was feeling and trying to maintain myself and finding myself again after being with someone for 10 years and then being single again. It was a whirlwind. And then once I got through that first year, then my mom passed. And so now here we are, year 2. It's a lot. So I was in a bad place, but for me, what I had done was I have a strong relationship with my family. So it was just a matter of shooting a simple text. I don't need to talk to anybody right now. I have no want or need, but what I do want and need is for somebody just to know where I'm at today and how I'm feeling and what I'm doing. So therefore I put my business out there, and that made me feel better knowing that I could have that support because a simple text back from them was perfect, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So,
Victor?
yeah. So anyways, that's where I was. Thank you for letting me share.
Yeah,
What
thank
about you, Victor?
So the closest thing that I've experienced as far as wanting to use was a using dream. I can't tell you exactly when it happened for me, but early on in my journey in recovery, the obsession to use was lifted. And by the grace of God, that when that happened, I haven't had a desire, to use drugs or any mood or mind altering substance since then. But the using dream part, I probably had one last week. I'm in my 12th year of clean time. I still do the things that are necessary to stay spiritually fed, to stay free, from any behaviors, practicing spiritual principles, all those things that I started practicing in the very beginning, I still practice today. And so, but a using dream, I have incorporated that into my recovery journey by using that as a motivator to continue my journey. I share with other people that, okay, a using dream, thank God it's just a dream, right? That's a reminder, as it is for me, it can be for you too, that exactly where you don't want to go back to. Anytime that happens, I know that it just confirms where I don't want to go back to, right? So I'm thankful for the using dreams when they do happen. But no, I haven't thought about using in 12 years.
Well, you know what? That's really cool that y'all haven't thought about using. But for me, right, using is always an option, but it's an option I just don't use to take, right? Mm-hmm. And this is for Dennis, right? Check this out. I always say that I'm drug-free, not drug-proof, right? And a successful day for me simply begins and ends with being clean, right? But I remember the last time I got high, right? When I think about getting high, right? Because it comes, right? It just might be like a sign, like you go past a street sign and it says, here's an option, because the disease, I don't know about you guys, the disease every now and then wants to test my chin, right? And I just go straight to my bag and say, oh, I remember I had congestive heart failure and I was using, right? I don't want to live like that anymore. So sometimes, right? I don't know what you guys do, but to fight the strong urges for me is I remember the last time I used and the devastation that it wrought on my life. And then I compare it to how I'm living now or what I'm going through now and the stress that I'm going. Ain't that much stress? Listen, that like trying to find the next one or finding the ways and means to get the next one. That's stress, right? Right. So let me go on and stop from my pulpit. The next question is, how do you talk with a loved one about their substance use? Y'all, everybody's face went blank.
Well,
Honesty.
well, it really depends on where they are in the stage of change, you know, whether you have pre-contemplation, you have contemplation, you have action, you have those. Okay, so if you're dealing with someone who is in pre-contemplation or they don't really think they have a problem, it's like pulling teeth. You're not going to make headway with someone who doesn't believe that they have a drug problem. I remember the day after we buried my mom in 1991. About 4 or 5 of my family members got together and they came to my apartment and they marched up to my door and they knocked on the door to have this intervention before they were called interventions. This was led by my sister and I sat there. I needed help yesterday, but I didn't want it until tomorrow. But I was in denial about everything that was going on in my life. And they knew that because my mother was gone, I wasn't going to be able to sustain. But because I was not ready to stop, I wasn't ready to look at what was going on in my life, I blew them off. I told them everything you and what about you and what about your cheating ways and what about your, you know what I'm saying? So it's like, I wasn't ready to hear that. So the answer to my question is, it depends on where the person is. Does the person want help? If you want help, I can help you. But if an individual does not want help and they're trying to tell help how to help them, then that's problematic. That's problematic. People don't hear you. I think there's a reading where it says an addict won't stop until they want to stop. They can be prayed over. You can cry over them. You can jail them. You can beat them, but they're not going to stop until they want to stop. So I think I heard Victor talk about willingness or his want to. I believe that that is the most important part of that's the most important part of the recipe of an addict who wants to stop using. They gotta want to stop.
Anybody else want to speak to that?
Yeah. I'd like to add to it that you're so right, LaDonna. I have, my personal experience, I have 2 of my older brothers right now that in full-blown active addiction. And like, there's just, the only thing that I can do today is just to be that example, you know, just be that presence when it's appropriate for them to see that there is help and there is something better that they can latch on to help them get to a better place in life if they want that. Now, in different stages where I have managed to see where there may have been times when they've been open to a change and maybe perhaps thinking about getting ready. And then I changed my format to where I would try to meet with them and try to give them some of the things back that I was giving, you know, in relationships. Like I have a sponsor, I work with a sponsor, and I'm a sponsor. So some of the principles that I'm practicing, they're practicing, we practice together in those relationships. I practice that with my brothers. But with them not being in that place that you just talked about, LaDonna, having the desire and being ready, that they continued on in the madness, and that's where they are today. And right now they're in a position to where there is nothing that could take. So I continue to be an example from a distance.
Okay. You guys, based on we have the same code language, right? Right. That I know that you guys go to 12-step programs, but some folks might not know that there are different pathways that other people can take. So could you speak to those?
Anybody? Go
ahead.
When you mention other pathways, do you mean outside of Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, or are you talking whether you work the 12 steps or you don't work the 12 steps, or you have a sponsor or you don't have a sponsor? So what exactly are you?
What I'm saying is you know, we a lot of us work in the field, right? So we know about, right, harm reduction. We know about those other pathways. And so, you know, just for the folks who are there, who might have someone, you know, that there are other pathways, and you know, everybody ain't feeling the God of my understanding, right? And so, right. So can anyone speak to that?
Yeah. I think based on identification, you have to find out what works for you.
Yeah.
You have to find what works for you. You have to, people have been getting clean in the church for many, many years. People have been getting clean in the fellowships or community support organizations like AA and NA, and you have Rational Recovery, and you have now, I think they have the biblical 12-step programs.
Celebrate Recovery.
Yes, Celebrate Recovery. You have the harm reduction program. Some people get clean and they have therapy. They just go to their therapist and they follow directions of their therapist, and they're able to stay clean. So I believe that it depends on what you can identify with, what works, what worked for you. You know, for a long time, people would just say, you know, go to church and let them pray on you, and they pray on you, you know, and, you know, put water on you. And we, you know, I remember those long sessions, and they were, and that's not to negate that. That's not to negate that. But, and of my faith, I know God can do it all, but you got to have some willingness. So it really lines up to me in what works for the individual. How can you get it? You might not get it the way that I got it. And for me as a clinician, it's not a one-stop shop. You know, there's not just one road where you can get this done. I think we we do people a disservice by acting as though there's only one way to get clean, because that's the way that you got clean. And I don't believe that. There are many roads.
I love that you said that. Just that last bit was perfect, because I hear that a lot. I've seen it a lot. You know, it's when you go into certain types of meetings, you know, if you're not doing this, then you're not doing it right. And you're supposed to be doing this because that's what they tell you to do, and you are not doing that. So it's like, wait a second now, we are all different, and my path is different than the next person to the next person to the next person. I have clients that it is remarkable to me that have literally walked in the door, never been told they had a problem. They felt they had a problem, came in, they had a problem, and are still sober today. And it's been 3 years, almost 3 years I've been here and working with them. And it's just like, wow, that is remarkable to me, because I needed help. I needed pushing. But then there are others that I know that have been in such a severe state of addiction with one substance that the other substance is not that for them. And so that's their recovery, and I'm not going to take that from them. But yeah.
So Elaine has a question, right? And this is one I know that well, I don't know that you guys went through it, but what about when you're on your recovery journey and folks, right, who have post-traumatic stress disorder based on your behavior, right, don't believe it's true because this is the 10th time you've done it, right? And so the question is, are there family members who won't accept your amends and believe in your sobriety, and how does that affect the family dynamic? You guys get it?
Yes. So that I'm going to say that that's going to be harder for me to answer, only because I do have family that were not in belief of that. However, that's not for me to decide. That's not for me to worry. I know what it is that I went through and the struggle that I went through and how far I've come and where I am today. So for me, it's kind of like, okay, if that even makes sense. It's like, whatever. And it's easy to say that, but if, for me, I'm comfortable. It's so hard to say exactly, because it's like this feeling as an addict and as a human, and where I am in my recovery and what I know. And so not allowing that to change where I'm at. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It does. But check this out, right? You come home, right? But you're the one that stole the TV set, right? Mm-hmm. You're the one that stole the kids' Christmas presents and sold them. And now you coming in here after 30 days clean, right? And act like we ain't supposed to trust you now. We're supposed to trust you now. Mm-hmm. But we've seen this before, right? And I'm tired of I'm sorry, right? So how does a person, right? What does that do to the family dynamic? And actually, we use the thing called time, the acronym, things I must earn, right? And I think, right, when I come back home from my 10th rehab, that everybody's supposed to be okay with me, right? So can we speak to that? Or did anybody have that experience?
I want to say real quick to that before I saw LaDonna about, I know, right? I like to talk with my hands. Before LaDonna jumps in, I want to say that I have been sober since December, not December, listen to me, October 15th, 2003. And still to this day, I can go home and I still know that I'm being watched. Okay. So I've been sober long enough to know, and for them to know, that I'm not that person anymore, but there's still that thought. So I just want to put that out there. LaDonna, please, I'm sorry.
No, that's good. I mean, I think here again, it takes what it takes. You're not supposed to trust me after my 10th rehab and I've been home 30 days. You know what I'm saying? Yes, because you are the person that stole the car. You are the person that ran off with the rent money. No, the not supposed to trust you. These things I must earn. You must earn trust. Now I think where it gets a little bit crazy is when, as the recovering person has an expectation. We work with people and all of this, and for some of us who engage in the fellowship of AA or NA or sponsor people, mentor, whatever, it's like you have a lot of nerve to expect that someone should trust you because you go away for 30 days. That's unrealistic. So therefore, you have to raise your acceptance and lower your expectations of your family. That's what needs to happen. And I also think that there needs to be boundaries. You know, there needs to be boundaries. Here again, what one fit look, when I got my daughter back after her grandmother raised her for a number of years, and I got my daughter back, of course she didn't trust me when she got here initially. We're from Northern California. She didn't trust me. I had to earn that trust because this is the child I had left. I had two girls at that time. Well, my younger son, he's never known his mom as an addict, you know, and even when my girls were young, I had a family that closed up the gap. So they will tell me now, and they are 34 and 37, that we didn't really know what was going on. We just knew we ate a lot of pizza, ate a lot of noodles, you know what I'm saying? But they didn't really know. But when they came back, I had to be willing to do something different. You know, you can set your clock by me. I'm pretty ritualistic in the things that I do. You know, I don't fall off the grid for periods of time. I find that it's called responsibility. You know, if you are 90 days clean and you come up missing for 4 hours and nobody knows where you are, of course they're going to be upset. Of course they are. You know, nobody wants to let you drive their car and you coming from treatment. Of course we don't trust you. You know, and it should be understood across the board. I don't understand why that's, you know, no, we don't trust you. No.
We're getting it's 6:53, right? And this is
Oh,
one thing
wow.
we didn't. We had a nice conversation. Time flies when you're having fun.
Yeah.
Let's talk about, right? You know, I always say that drugs is a response. Me using drugs was a response to something, you know, and I stopped asking why a long time ago. And I began to start asking what happened to me. And that relates to the trauma, right? I go back to the causal source, right? You know, why did I want to lie about who I was way back then? Because that was my first drug of choice, lying about myself, right? Because I didn't like me and what happened to me. And so can we talk about the interaction of how, right? Early trauma, right? How does that impact substance use and addiction? I know I just got deep on us, but yeah.
Yeah, you got pretty deep right there, but it's a deep issue. And so why not go deep and why not get with the deepness in it? You know, for me, you know, there are some things that transpired early on in my life that I associate with some trauma today. You know, and I realized today that some of those things are not nearly, you know, as severe as some of those things could have been, but yet they still played a part in my whole wanting to cover up some emotions, some feelings that I went through and would go through during active addiction. You know, there's an empty hole, a void that I'm trying to fill up, and I'm trying to fill that with outside things and circumstances, you know, but because I haven't gotten to the root and the source of the problem, which a lot of times stems from some trauma that happened very early on, and those trauma situations carry on throughout our lives, have carried out throughout my life. And what I know today is that I can't do it by myself. And I know that the best way to get to the root and the cause of and effects of something that transpired in my life and that is sticking with me today, that comes in the form of trauma, is to be open and honest with someone else. Means having a conversation, right? Getting vulnerable. I wasn't able to do that until I began to develop, first and foremost for me, a personal relationship with God. And then I was introduced to a man just like me that possibly, well, ain't possibly, had some trauma just like I had, that was willing to share with me his trauma, and therefore allow me to be vulnerable enough to share my trauma, and getting to understand how to continue to live and to thrive in this world and in this new life with the experience of trauma.
Now, Carl, what was the question again?
Uh-oh.
Okay. How did trauma impact, right? Like, again, using drugs, at least for me, and I can only speak for myself, was a response to something, right? Something happened to me where I didn't feel like I was enough, right? Still, I'm 57-year-old and I still struggle with feeling not enough, right? Now that I'm clean, right, and I'm not masking it with the drugs, right? The drugs out of the way, and so all of that inappropriateness is raising its ugly head. Like, I don't know if anybody remembers Gremlins, but they coming out, not the Mogwai, I'm talking about the Gremlins, right? Coming up like the Gremlins, and now we're addressing that now. But that always goes all the way back to the little boy, right? And so where did trauma play a part in fueling your need? Some people use shopping, some people use lying. And we just happen to use drugs, right? So where did trauma come in as a part of the fuel, the addiction part?
Well,
Does that make sense?
Yes. I was sitting here and I was thinking, and at first I said, I didn't have any trauma, but when I think about the experience of being raised by a single mom who was an alcoholic, who lost her only son when she was like 36 years old, and suddenly, and at that time I lost my mom. When I think about being 8 years old and being told that who I thought was my father was not my father, but this is your father, and this person over here that you thought was your father, he's not your father. But don't tell the man that you thought your father, don't tell him you know who your father is. I didn't know that was trauma. I thought that was a way of life. When I think about not being supervised and starting to do things as a young girl, that I shouldn't have been doing things out of sequence, doing things at a young age because I didn't have. Now I know that it's trauma. We were respectful. My mother had a fan belt on the door that she would beat your behind with if you got it. I didn't know that was child abuse. I thought that was you were doing what you were told. You understand? So things that we consider trauma nowadays was not trauma when I came up in the 60s, in the 70s. That wasn't considered trauma. Everybody's mom had belts and switches and all of that stuff that they would beat their kids with.
Right.
You understand what I'm saying? So what I see as trauma now was not trauma then, but let me say this, active addiction brought its own trauma for me because there were things that I was exposed to and things that I did that brought a different level of trauma to my life. So I don't know if that answers.
It does. It almost speaks to what some friends and I, we talk about when we lost our innocence. Right? There was a time, right, where all the innocence went out the door, right? And I got exposed to some stuff that I wasn't supposed to get exposed to. And my little boy mind, couldn't wrap itself around it, right? And so I needed to what's the Monsters Ball, that scene between Billy Bob Thornton and Halle Berry, that's right. And it was the scene that she said, I want to feel good, right? And I always wanted to feel good all the time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there was never a time when I understood that you have to go through hard times to get to the other side. So I needed to almost play God and begin to start controlling and manufacturing things, right? In order for me to feel like I was okay, right? And I believe that trauma, you know, because I remember when I was 50 years old and I was, and my father had Alzheimer's and I was cutting his toenails and he called me by my middle name, Fred, I love and I appreciate you. I was waiting for 50 years to hear that, right? I knew that when I heard that I was going to be hard, if he would have told me that, drugs wouldn't have came into the situation, because it was that hole that Victor talked about, right? Would have been felt with that validation that I always needed. And for somewhere there's a loss of validation for us, right? That allows us to do the one thing, you know, the first law of nature, right, is self-preservation. What is it about us, right, that does something that goes totally against, even an amoeba, right, will try to perpetuate itself. What's wrong with us that we find that putting something into our system that we know will kill us, right, is okay with us?
Well, I think that for me, it was a rite of passage. If you're raised by alcoholics and you're around people that drink and use, then you're going to feel like it's what you're supposed to do. Drinking was something that we did. There was nothing wrong with it. It's, you know, people gave their kids alcohol to make them go to sleep. People gave kids alcohol to watch them dance. People, I mean, alcohol in our family was a rite of passage. And so smoking marijuana in my community was a rite of passage. So it was just something that we did. When I think of Oakland in the 70s and the 80s, it was all about the it's your thing, do your thing culture, you know, and what you did, anything goes. I fell into the culture.
So, you know, I'm getting these text messages that we have to close. We have to close our part of the conversation and open it up to questions from those 68 listeners. Y'all have 68 people listening to y'all, right? Who might want to pose questions to us. So the floor is now open for questions, and you can again put them in Hoover, and we'll respond to those questions. And if you're not, we'll keep it going.
Well, while you're waiting on a question, let me jump in and talk about the trauma real quick. So
okay.
I just wanted to add to that, because everybody's trauma is different, right? I tell my clients that all the time. But for me, I was adopted, and I was born into, well, I wasn't born into, but I know that my biological, one of my biological parents was an addict. And then here I'm adopted. And so I think that in itself is like where I kind of get some like attachment stuff. Starts very, very young, and we don't even realize it, right? And then as I got older, I grew up in a military family. We were here, we were there every couple years, this, that, the other. My sister's my best friend. It was the two of us. And then we got into high school, and it was like they wanted us to separate so we could find ourselves. And it was like, well, wait, what's happening? My attachment comes back again, and nothing is validating, though I, you know, I excelled at some things and not at other things, but I wanted validation in these other things for some reason. And it's like, for what? I'm doing such a great job here. What is happening? What am I missing? And it's just, you know, I went through Hurricane Andrew. That was very, very traumatic for our family. But I can name it all sorts of things. And I think where I was going with that is just so that everybody can understand that, you know, what trauma is to you may not be trauma to the next person. And it could be something as a natural disaster. It could be being bounced around from foster home to foster home, adopted family, you know, living off the street. Everybody's got whatever that looks like to you. And how you know, clearly how we managed it was substances. And now it clearly didn't work, but look where we are. Just saying.
Okay, well, there's not any more questions popping up. So I'm gonna let's turn it, I'm gonna go to your professional side. What can family members do, right? Because we do, I know I did my mother, I did my father harm, right? And I had NA meetings to go to, right? To talk about, what I needed to talk about. But where are some community resources that folks can utilize when they're family members of somebody who is using or is caught up in their addiction, full-blown addiction?
I will speak on that. I just recently had a conversation with somebody about family resources. I am huge on telling my clients that it is not your responsibility to teach your family about what it is that you were going through. You will exhaust yourself, and you could potentially put yourself into a relapse. It's just not, there are too many resources in the community for them to get on their own in helping you. So when I'm like, when you hear your family say, I don't know what to do, what can I do to help you? What can I do? Okay, let me hand you this. Oh, let me hand you this. Let me hand you this. And then with a little, what is it, in the rooms, or even at Al-Anon meetings.com. There's all sorts of stuff that people can do on Zoom. Is amazing for that in itself, because it doesn't matter what time of day or where you are, but there's always a meeting available. But I think that it's important for us to not, as addicts, not to focus on trying to tell people and telling our clients or the same thing, and giving them the resources to help their family help themselves, just like they are giving us these resources so that we can help ourselves, like putting us into treatment or attempting to put us in treatment or whatever the case may be. That's my thought, my 2 cents.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
I believe, to sum up what Sarah was saying, I believe, if I'm correct about it, Sarah, just pointing people in the right direction, speaks volumes, and it's very helpful, and then the addict themselves has to perform some action, right? You just can't do the work for that addict. If there's a desire involved, then that desire has to come in the form of some action, and that's just how it's gonna work. That's how the plug-in happens. So direct people to the resources and allow them, for them to go and get plugged into those resources themselves, and that speaks of their desire, and like, I can only give somebody what was given to me,
Yes.
when it comes to like the principles that are involved that I practice today that help me stay fine-tuned in recovery and doing the right thing for the right reasons. Those principles have been instilled, and I enhance those principles by practicing those, and so by giving somebody some direction where they can find where to get plugged in at, and they'll find that if they practice the desire, which comes in the form of some action, and I think that's what Sarah was hitting on.
LaDonna, do you know of any community-based resources that you might share with the group or share with the folks out there that they might be able to tie into if they have someone, but they're having a hard time coping?
About 5 minutes left, y'all.
Okay. Sarah showed the Al-Anon, Alateen, Alatot. I think because we live in the information age, help is at our fingertips. We can access information that we need. One of the things that I think that we have to remember is that their help is for them. They can't get help to help us. You got to get help for yourself. It might be reaching out to clergy if you have that type of church. It might be getting therapy. It might be CODA meetings. I have found there is so much information now that everything is online. You can go to any kind of meeting that you would need to go to get the help that you need in coping with your loved one's addiction. They're there. Family groups. There's too many to name.
Well, okay, we are at 7-Eleven, right? We're not at the 7-Eleven, but it's 7-Eleven, right? And I would just like to thank Sarah, Victor, and LaDonna for sharing their knowledge and their insight with us. And many thanks to all of those of you who are joining us today. Please take a minute and complete the workshop survey. It helps us to know how we're doing. And the link is in chat. And I really appreciated hanging out with you guys, right? And I hope I did an all right job with moderating, right? Hey. So you all have a nice day on purpose and continue to be great on purpose.
Yay! Bye.
Yay.
Thank you so much.
Bye. It was great.
It was great. Thanks.
Do I just log on?
Have a good night.
Good night.